I'm 26 now, and I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 6 years old, so I've had it for most of my life already. The argument that I'm going to put forward today, the debate I'm going to put forward today for stigma is very, very similar to the ones that we've already heard today with regards to language and whether epilepsy is actually a disability. The stigma of epilepsy, kind of similar to those subjects, can relate to different aspects of epilepsy. So it can relate to the side effects that your seizure has already had on you. It can relate to actually the second that you're having a seizure in public, when you're falling down the stairs at school in front of everyone, everybody seeing up your skirt. So it can relate to different aspects of that. I'm going to go back just a little bit. When I was looking into the stigma of epilepsy and what it meant and where it's come from, the first thing I picked up on doing my research was the ancient Greeks. Now, they were very, very knowledgeable, very intelligent people, as you probably already know. And actually, in their time, the ancient Greeks believed, I don't know if any of you know this, they believed that people with epilepsy were incredibly rare and special. They believed that while we were having seizures, we were going back into another world to collect and bring back and deliver messages from the dead or passed away or what have you to people in this world. Now, I don't actually remember doing any of this myself. However, there is a certain aspect of client confidentiality, so I won't go there. Moving a little bit forward, into the Middle Ages, however, they believed we were possessed. They believed that if you had a seizure, you were automatically put into, let's say caves, into boxes or what have you, or hidden away in the dark, because they didn't want us to be in public. Now, if you move on a little bit further again to where we are now, the Oxford English Dictionary defines stigma as a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. Now, if you look at the three main words in that, disgrace, I would think about school and how I had lots of friends growing up. Then, however, when I was diagnosed, that sort of group got smaller and smaller as I got older and older into my teens, especially in secondary school. So they believed that I was then putting it on for attention. I don't know about any of you, but in secondary school, if I wanted attention, which I didn't, I could find an awful lot more creative ways to do it than fall down the stairs, again, as I said before. However, they felt I was a disgrace because I was embarrassing them, I was making a fool of myself, I was taking up time, all of the kind of things that they didn't want me to do because everybody wanted equality or to be the cool kids, and having seizures automatically made me uncool, apparently, and so they disregarded me because I was a disgrace. The second word in there is quality. I related that to work. I left school when I was 16. I went straight into work after doing a couple of beauty therapy courses, that kind of thing, trying my luck at different things. I went into full-time work. At that stage, I was going through a particularly bad patch, though I was actually having a combination of absent seizures, of tonic-clonic seizures, and also non-epileptic seizures. So it meant in a day, a working day, I could have up to 15 seizures in that day. And my first job were brilliant with this, had no problem at all, but this could have been because my boss was a good friend of my mother who also worked for the same company, and also his daughter had very severe epilepsy. And so he understood what was going on, he understood how difficult it must have been for me. My deputy manager that then came in, his brother had epilepsy, so he understood it as well. So the job after that, when we moved over from England to Ireland, my first job over here, I told them from the very beginning that I had epilepsy. That's fine, we don't have a problem with that at all, not a problem, come and work for us, we're delighted to have you. I then had a seizure. Well, didn't like me at all. They had, I don't know what their problem was, but they kind of stopped talking to me for a little while. They distanced themselves from me. They then shortened my hours. I then got stressed because of this, so started having more seizures. They then distanced themselves even more and then started creating problems, saying, well, we've had a complaint about you, so we need to put you into disciplinary action. In that disciplinary action, they made a big mistake and said to me, you know, all the problems that they'd had with my work, with the quality of my work, which was apparently affected by the fact I was having seizures. They also then said, oh, and yeah, we just can't cope with your epilepsy. And the look on their faces was to think, oh God, we shouldn't have said that while this is being recorded. That was a big mistake. However, I left that job because it was stressing me out, caused more problems, what have you. I then went to do Training for Success, which was a brilliant course. I then went into another job. The same thing happened again, almost to the point. And then a third time after leaving that job, I came into another job, same thing happened again. So that is 3 out of 4 jobs I've had. Apparently, my quality of work, my quality of doing any job has been affected by me having seizures. But it has always been not by the fact that I've told them I have epilepsy, but it's when they see me have a seizure. So I'd just like to, that definitely relates to quality of person and quality of work in their eyes, but not in my eyes, and I'm sure the same with you. The last word with that was person. I've had many, many personal problems with people. As I mentioned earlier with my friends, they were friends from the age of 3 or 4. All of a sudden they didn't like me, or as things got more stressful and they didn't want to be seen around me, they left. So I actually only have 1 or 2 friends now from when I was that age, whereas before I could have had maybe 20 or so, and if I didn't have seizures, I don't know whether that would have been the same or not. I know everybody changes their friends over time and as circumstances change. Also with personal relationships, I've had 2, one very, very recently, that has actually ended due to the fact that I have seizures. And they knew that I had epilepsy from the beginning. My most recent boyfriend now, he knew that I had epilepsy. He was one of my best friends for 1.5 years before we were in a relationship. His uncle actually died from the condition, unfortunately, so he was very, very understanding with that. His whole family were understanding and wanted to be there for me, and they were. In the last few months, I've gone through a very, very difficult patch where my seizures have increased, my warning signs have disappeared. I've been hospitalised at least twice. I've been put into intensive care. And he was there for me in the beginning, but he then started to find it more and more difficult. He didn't say that necessarily, but I could see it from the fact that I didn't see him as much, I didn't hear from him as much. And then he decided that he wanted to invite me to his sister's wedding, which I was delighted to go to. We'd been planning it for months. I'd booked hotel rooms, paid for hotel rooms, everything you could possibly imagine, got my outfit. Sorry, I'll finish there. And on the morning of the wedding, he rang me when I was staying in the hotel room from down the road and said, actually, I don't think you should come to the wedding today. And it was because I'd had a seizure 2 days before. He decided that I shouldn't go to the wedding, but if I wanted to, I could come to the evening part. And I then found out later on that he had told everybody at the wedding that it was because I'd had seizures that morning and that I was resting, where actually it was the stigma that he had, or I felt he had anyway, that he didn't want to be embarrassed by me, and he didn't want to have to explain to everyone or be the boyfriend of the person who was having a seizure there in the middle of the church while they were saying I do. So in my eyes, stigma is around. It can affect different aspects of it, and I think that's the problem as well, and that it also relates a lot to misunderstanding or no knowledge at all, and that's where it comes from.
My name's Eoin Kernan, and I work as part of the Awareness Committee for Epilepsy Ireland. And stigma is something that we talk about as part of our meetings quite a bit. We often talk and hear about the stories relating to negative attitudes or behaviours, even sometimes discrimination towards people with epilepsy. Although stigma around epilepsy has been around for a long time and has had a long history, going back to ancient times, as Katie mentioned, I believe that we are now far from the misconceptions of the past. which were rooted in popular and often religious beliefs, cultural superstitions, and sometimes even magical beliefs as well. Nowadays, people's approach to epilepsy is dictated by their understanding or knowledge of the condition, based on what they hear in the media, what they can learn online, and how we, people with epilepsy, can approach the subject with them. I'm proposing that the social stigma of epilepsy is no longer alive and well, but what we face today as people with epilepsy can sometimes be extreme reactions to the fear of the unknown, which comes from an immediate fear of it comes from a lack of knowledge, essentially. For a moment, let's think about how information about epilepsy has been disseminated to the public throughout the years. In ancient times, information was peddled through organisations with great power who were able to say what they liked, and in fairness also believed, in a media place with little distraction and cult following. Nowadays, through the great work of organisations and individuals around the world, including our very own Epilepsy Ireland, awareness campaigns and medical information is widely and regularly communicated with information that is based on sound scientific and medical fact. But we must remember nowadays, these informational campaigns compete with many others in a much busier and distracting media place, which might mean that they're not always as effective as we would like. When people are not reached with this information, they simply don't know. They do not know what epilepsy is. They do not know what the different types of seizures are. They do not know how to deal with the seizure. They do not know what is the right thing to do, to say, or to think about epilepsy. They think that flashing lights trigger every seizure. Often I hear that one. And when they are put in the position of meeting or dealing with a person with epilepsy for the first time, the fear of unknown kicks in, which can in some cases end up being communicated or expressed in similar ways to the way stigma used to be. They may use a safety mechanism in the form of words or actions to take care of themselves, and I believe subconsciously to take care of the person with epilepsy as well. Speaking about my own experiences, I can thankfully say I've never had to deal with an extreme reaction which might commonly be associated with stigma, such as discrimination or avoidance. But I have definitely experienced the fear of the unknown since my diagnosis 11 years ago. I have seen people's reactions in their eyes with questions like, what does that mean exactly? What should I say? What do I need to do, or what do I need to know now? Which they have never ever asked. But more importantly, I met people on the way who did ask. My parents' fear of the unknown was perhaps the biggest I've ever seen. I was the only person in my family who had ever had a diagnosis of epilepsy throughout all of the generations. But they asked questions and they sought information, and indeed got it when they didn't ask through the relationship that they had with my community nurse. My boss asked some odd questions too, which came from a fear of the unknown, but he trusted my responses and my judgment, and indeed I went back to work as a lifeguard at the time. My girlfriend asked even more questions, and she still does. And as people around me became more knowledgeable and aware about epilepsy in general, their fear started to fade. Of course, this process of getting to know the unknown is much easier and natural in the case of close family, friends, and work colleagues. It is still challenging when it comes to strangers and all the people you meet along the way. There's no denying that. But it is our challenge as people with epilepsy to become ambassadors for our condition, to teach people, to be open about what we have, to help them understand what the condition means, how they can deal with it, and how it won't affect their lives. We make sure that it doesn't affect our lives, and where it does, we live lives within the limits that we have. So, 2 questions I just want to leave you with. Think about the last few people you told about your epilepsy. Did you get a reaction associated with stigma, or was it just a fear of the unknown? Or was it something entirely different? And when you tell someone about your epilepsy, do you invite questions? Do you invite them to ask you what they don't know so that they can then become more knowledgeable and their fear starts to fade?